or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm taking a quick break from writing a report to have a quick conversation with you all. I hope this is beneficial. In light of some of the recent things that have been happening in our field, especially those in relation to the BACB's abdication of the ethical code and whatnot, I have been thinking a lot about the topic of fighting for civil rights and trying to address concerning ethical behaviors. And a thought just kept on circling around in my head. It's been a while since I've read Nietzsche, but the quote of he who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And the other part of the quote that frequently is missed or used on its own, but I think it's important contextually, is when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. And I've been thinking about this question a lot, or rather this statement and the questions that's come with it. And the thing that keeps coming up for me over and over again is who is or what is the monster that we're fighting, or monsters, I should say. And one of the things that keeps coming up for me is often when we're so stuck or caught up, and we can be truly stuck, by the way, or caught up on it, fighting monstrous behavior, we very frequently relate that or stimulus pair that with the person. And this is difficult because the person who's emitting that behavior is behaving monstrously. But this is also challenging because when we get stuck on that, that increases the probability of us engaging in dehumanization ourselves. And I think that's the monster. And I think that's what Nietzsche was alluding to, perhaps, or maybe not. Maybe I'm reading into it. But the important thing is, this is a way that we can apply this philosophical question. Because he who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. Nietzsche is not saying, don't fight the monsters. He's saying, beware of the trap. And I would like to add to that, when we gaze too long into the abyss of monstrousness, when we gaze too long at the problem, we very frequently will pair the stimulus to the point that we dehumanize others. And when we engage in dehumanization of others, we also then dehumanize ourselves. Inside of acceptance commitment therapy, this concept is related, the dehumanization of yourself. That's self as content. Or rather, and there's biases in the other direction of self as content. I can't do that because I'm a good person, or I'm a bad person. Those ideas, those thoughts, those relational frames and verbal behaviors that we engage in. And when we engage in those behaviors, what we're doing is we're actually not allowing ourselves to be flexible in our engagement with our environment. And so the concept of self as context is I behave in a certain way. It allows us to be able to see our behavior within context and then realize that I am neither a good person nor a bad person. I am a person who does good, and I am a person who does bad. And I'm the same person, and I'm capable of both. And that creates flexible verbal behavior, which allows us to be flexible in our engagement with our environment and allows us to be able to engage more ethically. And there's a lot of really fantastic research that's been published on this. I highly recommend just going out and looking yourself. The Journal for Contextual Behavioral Science has tons of research, and to become an ACBS member is, I think, minimum $15 if you're doing a professional. It's a values based, so if you can add more, then please do so. But let's go ahead and bring it full circle, because here's the next part of it. Self as context is important, and so is others as context. Because what happens when we dehumanize is we engage in others as content. We associate, we make that relational framework of that person is. You are bad. You are evil. You are good. And then when information that is contradictory to that crops up, then we tend to dismiss it, because of the way our languaging and relational frameworks work. And so I highly encourage looking into both acceptance commitment therapy or training and relational frame theory. And in fact, I've been very slowly working my way through the book Understanding and Applying Relational Frame Theory by Siri Mingo, Evelyn Gould, and Julia Fiebig. Sorry if I butchered your names, y'all. And I will post a link to that along with the description of these concepts in a more simplified form in the comment, in the caption for this video when I publish it. But the point being that when we engage in this relational framework, when we identify what we're doing, when we seek to humanize the other person, even as we oppose the dehumanizing, unethical, immoral behavior, we are then making sure that we ourselves do not become monstrous. And so here's a few things that I wrote down. By the way, this took me a little bit to do. I've been writing this in the evenings for the past few days, just because I've been thinking about this and considering it. And so I'm not this good with that after RFT. It takes practice to learn these skills, and I definitely was doing a lot of referencing. But here are the relational frames that are in context to address this particular issue of dealing with unethical, immoral, or dehumanizing behaviors while maintaining an empathetic and compassionate perspective. So the first relational frame is deictic, D-E-I-C-T-I-C. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Framing. This frame refers to perspectives. In the empathetic context, it allows us to take the perspective of others to understand their experiences and their emotions. And this can help humanize individuals who engage in harmful actions, allowing us to see them as people influenced by their circumstances. Now, circumstances includes phylogeny, ontogeny, and culture, right? We have verbal communities, rather than simply as monsters. So, however, it's important not to lose sight of the harmful actions themselves and to continue to condemn those actions. So we're condemning behaviors, not people. Next, we have a hierarchical framework or framing. This frame involves categorizing things as being above or below others. In this context, it might mean prioritizing empathy and understanding over condemnation, or vice versa. It's critical to find a balance and acknowledge the importance of both. So it's okay for us to condemn a behavior while maintaining someone's humanity. Now we have the coordinate frame. This frame involves recognizing that two things can be separate but related, right? Here, it might mean understanding that the individual who deserves empathy and understanding and their actions, which may be harmful and deserving of condemnation, are distinct but related entities. It's possible to empathize with the person while condemning their actions. And then the last frame that I was able to identify through this process of thinking this through is the causal framing. This frame is about understanding cause and effect. It can help us to recognize how certain conditions and or experiences may lead individuals to behaving harmfully. Again, emphasizing the importance of empathy. However, it also serves as a reminder that understanding the causes of harmful behavior does not excuse them. In summary, when we're utilizing these relational frameworks to help us understand and to maintain a firm stance against unethical and immoral and dehumanizing behaviors, we're also fostering an empathetic and compassionate perspective. It's about humanizing individuals and understanding their circumstances and conditions. Condemning harmful actions, not the individuals themselves. It is a delicate balance that requires consistent thoughtfulness, mindfulness even, if you will, and adjustment. So the thing is that the same thing goes for the BACB. So the BACB has said that this is a free speech issue, which it's not, because it's a violation of our ethics code, and we have voluntarily joined as a membership of a community where we're a community of peers, where we, by holding that credential and maintaining it, we agree to abide by the ethics code. And there are multiple ethics violations for that podcast and what the content is, as well as for the continued verbal behavior that's being engaged in that's justifying that behavior. And I have posted multiple videos and live streams, and will continue to be publishing and posting content to prove that this is the case, because within the hierarchical framework of the First Amendment and the ethics code, when we voluntarily agree to be members of this verbal behavior community of behavior analysts, what we're agreeing to is adhere to that ethics code. And in fact, the courts of the land have consistently sided with organizations that enforce codes of conduct and ethics codes in relation to the speech and verbal behavior of people who belong to those verbal communities. That's not what the courts call them, but that's what they are. And so for the BACB to abdicate their responsibility of enforcing our ethics code in this particular context is concerning, because it is very much within the legal and ethical requirements of the BACB to enforce our ethics code when it comes to conversations such as this. Are there contexts where conversations about that topic can happen? Yes, context matters. Context matters a lot. In the context of discussing ethical conditions and ethical issues, where we're using eugenics and the arguments for genocide and mass incarceration, and there's a very consistent history of this that we can refer to. We can refer to those as non-examples of ethical behavior, non-examples of humane moral behavior. That's a context where we can have this conversation. But the reason why the podcast is concerning is that that's not the context, that's not the tone, that's not what the conversation is about. The conversation is about a thought experiment that dehumanizes. And I will note that if you look at the verbal behavior of the individuals involved, you see a pattern of verbal behavior for dehumanization and advocacy for approaches that are not flexible, that are not scientific, and that are inconsistent with being an ethical, humane behavior analyst, therapist, person. And so we need to make sure that we're looking at that context. I will also note that if you go and listen to the podcast episode, that the piece that was added at the beginning about it being a thought experiment was not added until a month or more later, when there was backlash against these individuals for their verbal behavior. When people became aware of it. So context, again, matters. But what also matters is when we're having these conversations, when we're talking about these ethical issues, when we're contacting the BACB and protesting their abdication of their ethical responsibility to address these issues, we need to make sure that also if and when we come across these people who defend or are engaging this verbal behavior, we must, I cannot say this enough, maintain their humanity and make sure that we prioritize their humanity, even as we actively, vocally, professionally, clearly oppose the unethical behavior involved. Because we can hold those two ideas at the same time, of this person's humanity and the fact that they engaged in unethical behavior at the same time. And we must do that. Else, like Nietzsche said, if we fight the monster, we got to be careful that we ourselves do not become monstrous, that we not become monsters. Again, Nietzsche said, he who fights monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. When you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. The monster we're fighting is unethical behavior. We fight it within ourselves. We fight it within our communities. We fight it within others. And if we become monstrous, if we dehumanize the person, even as we oppose the behavior, we become the monster we fight. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Please like, share, spread the word. Please contact the BACB and protest this. You can go to BACB.com, select Contact Us, and submit your concerns regarding this. Please keep in mind that while this is free speech to protest those behaviors and to oppose these behaviors, it is not appropriate for us to be unethical in our own behavior. So maintain, even though it might be hard, respect and the humanity of the next person. Please. Because if we don't do that, we are becoming the thing that we fight. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.